Hey, James, how are you?
I'm doing good, Deb.
Good, good, good. I'm so glad that you'll have a chance to share with our audience today because you have a lot to share. And I love your perspective on sort of who you are, what you bring to this world, and how you use it.
Well, I love to share it.
That's great. Good. So let me tell, I guess, our audience a little bit about how you and I met. I want to say it was at a workshop in Tennessee, right?
Yep.
And there were a bunch of folks there, and we were all sort of sharing our ideas, right, on our businesses and how we wanted to move forward. And then you and I actually ended up in Free Agent Academy together.
Yep.
So
yeah, that's pretty much it. We met. I think it was '09. It would have been '09.
Wow, yeah, I think you're right. I think maybe that's right. It was probably the fall of '09.
It was spring.
Was it spring? Oh, my.
Yeah, I just happened to remember. It was the only one I was able to make it to.
Wow. You know what? I think you're right. That's right. It was March of '09. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And what's so interesting to me is, here we've only known each other. We met once. So we've known each other for a couple of years, but we've been very connected through social media. And so for a lot of folks who think that social media is just a total waste of time, and how on earth could they ever do that, James has all the secrets. He'll teach you how to do it and how to do it really well, because he does.
I love it.
Absolutely. So now, James, as you know, I'm all about helping folks, because you've actually taken the Discover My Best Focus course to the Free Agent Academy that I offer. And I'm all about helping people figure out how they're wired, and most importantly, then how to use it in either a career or a ministry or a business or project work or even volunteer work, believe it or not. So would you mind sharing with our audience a little bit about your wiring and what that means to you and what some of your strengths are?
Well, I've actually taken the DISC profile twice.
Really? Did you fail the first time?
I did. I did. I certainly did. The questions were confusing.
No failing her.
But it was. I found it. It seemed to be easier for just me personally the second time around, because I kind of understood how to answer the questions. I know maybe that seems strange, but I had never taken any type of a profile or personality test before, so it was really my first time at it, and I was like, well, is this how I perceive or how people perceive me? And
yes.
So I allowed myself to get a little off track doing that. But the second time I understood it better and had a better grip on what I was thinking and how to kind of start answering those questions. And so, of course, I came out as a high D and an I, as somebody who doesn't fall in love with the details, but is more like, oh, there's an idea. Oh, wait, no, do that idea. So I
lots
can relate. Of irons.
Yes.
And the fire, one with the foot.
Yes, absolutely.
That goes along with that, but also I'm pretty outgoing and get kind of excited, and of course my dream my whole life I've just always been in love with talk radio.
Really?
And it's just always been kind of my thing. And so I grew up listening to talk radio, barely even ever turned on the FM. I didn't even know there was an FM side, It wasn't that bad, but it was bad. And so, so I listened to tons of radio. I used to ride around in my mom and dad's truck with them, and I would put on the headphones and maybe listen to baseball, and I would repeat everything the announcer said while we were driving, because they couldn't hear maybe. I had in my headphones.
Yeah.
I just repeat it line for line, 9 innings long.
Wow.
I used to do that kind of stuff. So just always fascinated with that. And so about a year ago when I started the coaching thing and I started learning about how you can do podcasting and stuff, well, I just jumped right, goes with the D&I personality. I just jumped right in and kind of got started. And just a chance to share my information and talk as goes along with D's and I's, and I just was all over it.
Well, it's so funny. One of the things that, first of all, I love listening to your podcast. And tell folks about your podcast address where they can find your podcast.
Well, everything I do is found at bluecollarcoaching.net.
Great.
.com thing is
Good. So
I'll never get my hands on that thing, but do bluecollarcoaching.net, and I have the Blue Collar Business podcast there.
Yep. And you know what I love? First of all, I love the subjects and the way you tackle them, because just like you said, with your D&I wiring, D&I folks tend to be fearless, sometimes a little reckless occasionally, but definitely fearless.
Some more than others, guilty.
Absolutely guilty as charged. But what I love too is it's so funny. The way you positioned to your audience is so perfect. Even down to your intro is just so dead on. I love it.
The music that I use?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got the whole twang going when I listen in. Yeah. I mean, you've got this New York girl twanging in her car, in her Mercedes, as she's driving down the road. That's hard to do.
I'll pull something off if I can do that.
I love it. I love it.
I mean, it's, to turn on the business coach of me just for half a second.
Yeah.
It's, the group that you brand yourself to is step number one. It's step number one, because once you can identify with a certain group, then you can learn what it is they need from you and work to deliver that.
Yes.
Whereas folks who just are product focused nonstop, but it doesn't have a group that they're going to take that to, you'll stifle yourself quick, because as I found through my show, and this ties into my wiring some, is my audience is talking back to me, and the thing that I started with, the product and service that I came out of the gate wanting to do, is not what my audience wants, at least not to a high enough percentage to spend too much time on it. But because I've connected with them, then I can take other areas and skills and some other knowledge base, and I can repurpose that back to that same group. So I'm not having to restart my whole existence.
That's so smart. I mean, that's really strategic thinking, which, of course goes along with sort of, being a business owner, right? We have to think strategically and then actually do something with the strategy we've developed.
Yeah.
Now, James, with your D&I wiring, I happen to be D&I wired as well. But of course, we all have varying degrees of different components of those strengths. What would you say, James, are the two really key strengths that you lean on the most today in your business?
Number one is connecting with people authentically. I caught a little bit of not pushback or not too much negativity, but I tend to be a little bit sarcastic and just a little bit self-deprecating in what I do, in an attempt to help my audience maybe relax a little and maybe relax their posture and sit back and feel like they're talking to somebody who understands where they're coming from. So, just my hopefully an empathy, ability towards empathy, and to help people just kind of relax in their spot where they are and to help communicate with them well, seems to be my biggest strength that I pull on from all of this. And the second one, I don't know. I focus so much on that one sometimes.
Yeah.
I get to take a look at some other little areas, that I seem to be stronger in. But I seem to be a lot better at written communication than I thought I would be. Right away. I mean, I seem to be developing that a little bit.
That's great.
And I'm not sure what part of the D&I that fits into.
Well, what's interesting, too, to me, I also, at least as a professor at Free Agent Academy and as a coach, I also see in you that gifting of action taking.
Yeah.
You're really great at turning an idea into an execution pretty quickly.
Sure. Well, and I don't spend a whole lot of time, what's a good phrase here, worrying too much about how well it's going to work for me, whether or not it's going to be, ultra successful. But if I could get in there and put it out, if it just helps one or two people, then great, then I just go with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one of the challenges, go ahead, James, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to, an example of that is tomorrow's blog post that's coming out. Somebody sent me an email wanting to know what 3 books I would recommend for a brand new entrepreneur. So rather than just answer it there, I was like, blog post. I'm always looking for content.
Oh, I love it.
I emailed him and said, tomorrow's blog post will be that. And so I just threw that together real quick. You know, I mean, there's 1,000 books, and these are just 3 that I picked. They're maybe my favorites right now or whatever. But just being able to throw something out there like that, just to get it out. I mean, so many people just stop and they're afraid, or it's not perfect, or it's not ready, and they're not learning. I mean, it's this circle that you have to have as you're taking on your wiring.
That's right.
Say. And so you've got to find, if you don't start trying different stuff, you're not going to find where your strength is. And so you get into this circle that just stops you. That you know, instead of enables you, it disables you.
You know what I love? It was Dan Miller a few months ago. Dan Miller is the author of 48 Days to the Work You Love and No More Mondays. We both know him well. And Dan Miller was saying in one of his podcasts a couple of months ago, one of his books just came out in paperback. I believe it was 48 Days to the Work You Love. And after it came out in paperback, and it had been out for like months and months and months and sold a whole ton of copies, right? And it had already been out in hardback too. And he got an email from someone who said, by the way, you have a chapter missing. And he was like, what? And he opened up the book, and the person was right. It jumped from like chapter 12 to chapter 14 or something odd like that. And he said, you know, I proved it, my editor proved it, other folks proved it, we all missed it. But you want to know something? It's okay, because it still sold thousands and thousands of copies. And I've now gone back and re-edited it, and I'm still giving people the great information that they were looking for, just now in a different way. I mean, it was just so cool to see that even someone as uber successful as Dan Miller is, it happens to all of us. So it was sometimes when we kind of get stuck in this analysis paralysis for too long a period of time, we almost are afraid that we're going to make a mistake. My perspective is that we're going to make a mistake, and woohoo, someday you'll find it, or somebody will find it for you, and then you'll correct it then, right?
Yeah, and some of my best learning experiences were through my mistakes and the motivation that came out of those.
I love that, James. That's such a great life lesson for all of us. I think it's John Maxwell's book, Failing Forward. He really talks about how for each of us, you know, we're going to ultimately make mistakes over and over and over again. And if we're not making mistakes, it probably means we're not trying to do too much. So really now it's more a matter of how do we sort of learn from that mistake? How do we do something differently as a result of it? You know, that's really what it's more about than anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now, James, tell us a little bit. So now here you've got this really great strength of connecting with folks, and you're using it in a whole bunch of different ways with what you do. You know, certainly through your podcasts, right? You're using it definitely in social media. I see you using it a lot.
Yeah, and I just have a complete blast in social media. You know, it's interesting that some of the skills I learned years and years ago, I was real big into the online gaming community. And in a lot of ways, that community was a pioneer in online communication because they were trying so hard to strategize, and because they would get together in small groups and put together teams or clans, they called them.
Yes.
And so we were trying all kinds of strange things to keep in contact with each other. We were freelance creating our own websites and putting in our own message boards and our own forums. We're talking, this is 7-8 years ago.
Wow.
Back in 2001, 2002, we were doing this stuff.
Wow.
And so we were using these weird, I mean, Skype didn't exist then. And so people were releasing these open source audio things that they were more like walkie-talkies. There was one called Roger Wilco.
Oh, it's like a CB version of talking, right?
It was exactly that. And you had to hold down a button to talk, and you couldn't both talk at the same time. But we were trying all this stuff to communicate, and everybody else was like, you have a friend in where? You guys are weird. Why would you have friends in other cities that you never talk to, you know?
Right.
So, but what happened is all of us who were doing that years ago have brought that skill set with us into social media. We understand some of the do's and don'ts of working together or introducing ourselves into communities that aren't used to seeing us, and you don't splatter your you're linked to your junk all over the place when you walk right in the door, and just some things that people are just now trying to learn are things that we were using years ago. And so I'm finding that as I implement that into my social media behavior, it is really, I'm gaining, there's just a lot of recognition that comes along in the people who are diehard users of it. Mm-hmm. I'm able to kind of become comfortable with them quickly. And it's really exploding into a lot bigger numbers than I would have ever planned to see, but it's been a lot of fun. I'm not one of those guys with 50,000 followers, but that's...
Well, not yet.
Consequential. Not yet. Exactly. Exactly. But the online world is craving authentic, real interaction with other like-minded people. And if you can learn how to do that online, you're not going to have a problem, connecting with other people.
It's so funny you say that, because a lot of folks, especially I know from my corporate background, it's very common for people to want to put on a certain image, a certain appearance that things are a certain way. And, so here we are, we're recording this interview right now via Skype. I'm sitting in my great room. My washer machine and dryer are going not too far away from me. I'm not sure if you can hear them or not. No. And my husband's upstairs having his dinner. So, there are things, life goes on around us. And if I try to hide it and make it sort of like, I'm in this very cold, austere, corporate office, it's just not who I am. It's just not where I'm most comfortable. I'm most comfortable right here. And if the weather was nice, we'd be doing the interview from the backyard.
Exactly.
And I think that's probably one of the reasons also why people very much relate to you, because even in something as simple as whether it's your podcast, your blog, or even on Facebook and Twitter, James, you are who you are, and you don't try to be anything other than who you were, the way you live your life. I mean, I love the way you bring your kids into certain messages and things that are going on, and how you really are just very transparent in what's going on.
Well, I found it's easier to keep track of the truth.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and what I'm finding online is people appreciate that a lot more. And if you come across stuffy, people are hitting the off buttons and the stop and the go away, and it hits people wrong. They're uncomfortable with it.
Yeah.
Because they feel like you can't identify with them, and you don't understand where they're coming from. And people are looking for other people that they can identify with. And if they can identify with a Fortune 500 CEO, they will, if they can.
Right.
And I think that's some of the magic around that Undercover Boss show that I know a lot of us have seen, is because they get to see the human side of the CEO, and now they feel like, some big organization, the person who's running it actually does have a heart, and he wasn't built in a factory.
Exactly. I mean, I know I've been really blessed to work with some amazing CEOs and just really good people. I mean, caring individuals, wonderful hearts, a perspective to help the world and help their employees and help their customers, just really service-oriented, real good service of the world. But then you hear some horror stories that are out there, and I often wonder if they're the same way at home. Like, do they really speak to their children that way, their wife? That type of thing. What I was going to say too, what I love about your wiring is that we kind of talked a little bit about it before. There's a level of fearlessness that comes along with being D&I wired. I know our motto is typically, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than for permission.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes that gets us in trouble with our spouse, because a lot of times when it comes to business and entrepreneurial pursuits, we get very excited about certain ideas that through our lens of our wiring just seems totally infallible. Yeah.
And over the years, and my wife and I have been married for almost 21 years. And
congratulations, that's awesome.
Thank you. One thing I've noticed is that I am a really good salesman at home. I mean, I can sell my wife on anything.
Yeah.
And I have to be careful with that, because unintentionally, it's almost become manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got to be real cautious, and I've got to slow down.
Yes.
You know, she definitely isn't D and I. She's the S and the C.
Yep.
And we're definitely the opposites.
Yep.
And I need to slow down and take in some of her wisdom, because some of the crazy stuff that I've done, if I would have taken time to hear her out, I know I wouldn't have done it. So
yeah.
It's a learning process.
Oh, I can so relate. You're a brother from another mother, as we say in New York.
Yeah. I do jump in, you know, and the biggest thing is, years ago I would jump in too deep financially, and so I don't do anything even remotely like that anymore. So none of my crazy ideas cost us any real amount of investment of money. It's a $50 idea here, you know, something simple, and it's mostly just coming up with an idea and going, well, let's test this out and see how it goes.
That's great. Now, James, what would you say is the biggest takeaway? So you had your DISC report, and you kind of see how you're wired, and from there you gleaned what some of your strengths are, and true to form, you're probably spending 70-80% of your time in your strength zone. Yeah. That's all good stuff. What would you say for someone who is thinking, oh, Lord, you know, how can this test tell me who I am? I know who I am. I have a really good handle on myself as a person, and I know what I do really well.
You know, I was contemplating that very question today, and you didn't even send me these ahead of time.
No, I did not. It's completely authentic here.
Well, and what I kind of just decided in my heart was that, let's be honest, we all spend our whole lives even trying to understand ourselves.
That's true.
I mean, we are complex creatures. I mean, my DISC profile says that I'm not a details-oriented person, but there are certain things that I go to take on, like if I'm designing somebody's website or I go back and I am looking deep into a lot of that stuff.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
I do have, if you get me into the right realm, you know, if I can exercise or, you know, some of my creativity, and I'm really exercising what I'm really wired to do, then I can go ahead and be a little detail oriented. I think that your wiring, you know, some of those areas that maybe you're generally low in, I think those will spike a little as you do operate more in that 80%. Those can go ahead and spike up just a hair. Yep. As you find yourself, I mean, have you seen that as well?
Absolutely. You know, it's so funny. I often say to people, if you send me a spreadsheet, my eyes are going to roll back in my head if I have to look at it for too long. Now, I mean, I spend part of my time, you know, in corporate life traveling all around the world, opening up subsidiary offices in, 14 or 15 countries. So I had to have spreadsheets and project management and budgets and things like that. So I was able to do it for short spurts of time. If I do it for too long, it becomes very draining to me. It kind of de-energizes me. And then I have to go right back into my strength zone so I can get re-energized. Is that the same for you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Or I got to pull somebody else in to help me be in that area. And I think that's the big thing is, if you get in front of somebody and maybe they'll ask, well, are you details oriented, or maybe you're applying for a job that a lot of that job you have experience and you can do well, and then they put on their details oriented.
Right.
And then you put down, well, not kind of details oriented.
Right.
You know, but if you've gone through a personality profile, you can identify for sure, no, I'm not that strong there, but I'm strong here. You know, how can I leverage one to help lift up the other? And it's important for us to understand our different wirings so that when we do get on the job hunt, or when we are trying to figure out where to plug ourselves in, we can make sure that when we look at that list of job responsibilities, that it lines up where we're strongest. Not what we've done before.
Absolutely.
Not what we've done before, but where our skill set lies, where we have the most fun, where it gives us the most energy. Those are two completely different issues.
You know, it's funny. I was speaking to someone the other day, and I said to them, we were sort of meeting for the first time, and I said, well, what are your strengths? What are the things you do really well? And she was taken back. She said, no one's asked me what I do well. They've always asked me what I've done. Yeah. Big difference.
Big difference. Absolutely.
So now, James, for folks who want to connect with you, they would go to your bluecollarcoaching.net site.
Yep.
Right? And your podcast is also up on iTunes.
Yes. The Blue Collar Business Podcast. You type Blue Collar Business anywhere, and I have taken over.
Yay! That's great. I love that.
Even in Google, Blue Collar Business, I'm right at the top for the podcast and for the website.
Well, it was so funny when you came up with that branding, that idea through Free Agent Academy. And I remember you'd come through the course and you went through the branding course, and that was where you landed. And I was like, oh my goodness, James has just nailed it. This is perfect.
Yeah. I went after the people I understood and that would understand me.
Yeah. And you're very smart to do that. And man, oh man, their businesses are better for it because you're taking all of that knowledge and experience and expertise that you have, and you're able to deliver it in a way that they can actually do something with it.
Absolutely. And what kind of the way I work is we have the why, the where, and the how, specifically off, and it all branches off of the podcast. And then at the podcast, I'll tell you why you should do something and where you should go to learn it.
Right.
And then if I can help and do it myself, I'll also teach you the how through the blog, through the webinars. So we kind of have a system and a plan here we're working where we deal with the why, the where, and the how. Oh,
I love it. I love it. And I think if nothing else, people should at least hear your opening jingle. I love that. I really do. You've got some you've got some amazing content. And for folks that have their own businesses, especially that are in the trades, I mean, I can think of no one better. There's no one else I would refer them to that I do refer them to other than you.
Well, thank you very much. You can find the podcast at bluecollarbusinesspodcast.com. Takes you right to the correct category at the website.
Awesome. Hey, James, thanks so much. Thanks for all you're doing to help all the other businesses out there. And also thanks for spending time with us today and just sharing a little bit about how you're wired and how you're using it.
Deb, it's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks so much. Have a great night.
Thanks, you too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.